Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic, let's do it. What's the scariest situation you've ever been in? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A bear and I startled each other when I stumbled on it going around a large fallen tree on a hike. It stood up, and we were eye to eye from 7 or 8 feet away for about the 2 longest seconds of my life. We both decided discretion was the better part of valor and went on our own ways. When I was in college, I was at a bar and caught the eye of a very pretty girl. I sent over a drink, she came over, and we had a great time and committed to seeing each other again. When I left to go to my car, a stranger, a guy, approached me and pointed a handgun directly in my face. Apparently, he thought the girl was his and had watched what had transpired inside. I was frozen in fear and couldn't even beg for my life. Then the girl came out, saw what was going on, and screamed at the gunman, and he turned around and left. We started dating, but this person kept showing up and throwing out threats, so we decided to end it if she could move across the country. I was sucking slowly. The symptoms were present for over a month. At first, I had COVID and an ear infection. Then I tested positive for strep throat. Rounds of antibiotics and steroids didn't help. My inhaler, asthmatic, and a breathing treatment didn't help. I went to urgent care and was treated like an attention seeker. They said there was nothing they could do since nothing came up in a chest x-ray. They told me it was probably long COVID and to follow up with my GP if I didn't start feeling better. That night, Friday, and the next 2 days, my Apple Watch started alerting me to an unusually high resting heart rate. I could barely walk across my living room or talk on the phone at work without gasping for air. Finally, I got a hold of my GP. She sent me for a CT scan when she learned the steroids and inhaler didn't help. On my drive home, I got her call telling me to not go home and instead drive straight to the nearest emergency room. Multiple bilateral pulmonary embolisms, blood clots in both lungs. I was so close to death. The scariest thing for me was that I almost let it go, thinking it was long COVID that just needed to run its course. My very young kids almost didn't have their mother. I still wake up over 6 months later in a panic from it, not getting to see my sons grow up. I'm also in a state of depression for some reason. You'd think I'd love life after all this. I live in a building in a rough area for a while with my partner at the time and their kid, maybe 5 at the time. Gunshots and police were a regular occurrence there. The one that got me the worst, though, was one night around 2 to 3 a.m. I woke up to a loud banging noise. This time it was close. It was somebody kicking in my next door neighbor's door. I didn't know them well, just a hello or whatever passing them in the hallway sometimes. Eventually, whoever it was broke in, and they began fighting in the hall. I could hear multiple voices hitting and eventually screaming for help. I grabbed a weapon and was looking through a peek hole in the door, debating whether to go help or not. I couldn't see anybody and didn't know how many people were out there or if they were armed or not. My partner and their kid were still asleep. I didn't want to open the door and risk anybody coming into our apartment. It was a sickening experience. The next day, after things were settled down, we were heading out for the day. Walking down the hall, I could see the bloodstains on the floor and some of the walls from the night before. We moved out of that building not long after. Going through a huge storm in a 30-foot motorless open-catch sailboat, we either sailed or rowed to move. We were maybe 80 knots offshore of Nova Scotia and spent probably 6 to 7 hours in 10 to 20-foot swells, pouring rain and little to no visibility. Myself and this guy, Rob, were the only 2 people on the boat who weren't either completely sick or just losing it. So we had to run the boat, just the 2 of us. 6 other crew members were either throwing up everything they had or losing their shit, thinking they were going to die. Completely incapacitated and unable to do anything of use. One of our crew members almost got tossed out of the boat from a swell. He grabbed the rope that lined the outside of the boat, so only his legs hit the water. We were able to get them out of the water and back on the boat pretty quickly. The first time in my life I thought, I'm gonna die here. And I truly believed it. Yes, likely we could have gotten rescued by the Coast Guard, but it was absolutely terrifying and frantic, and it felt like 4 days, not 6 to 7 hours. I say this is one of the scariest moments because, as mentioned, it was the first time I thought death was a likely possibility, and it just showed me how insignificant we are when compared to the power of Mother Nature. If she wants to take you, she can easily. One of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had was when I got lost on a mountain while hiking. The day had started off perfectly, ideal for a walk to clear my mind, so I decided to go alone, a choice I would soon regret. At first, everything was going well. I was enjoying the scenery and the peace, but suddenly the weather changed. Black clouds appeared out of nowhere, and in no time, a thick fog enveloped me, making me completely lose my way. Although I tried to stay calm, with every step I seemed more disoriented. Anxiety started to grow, and the silence, broken only by the wind, heightened my sense of loneliness. In a moment of desperation, I sat down on a rock, feeling small and exposed, as if the mountain was absorbing me completely. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of running water. I decided to follow that sound, which finally led me back to the trail. Exhausted but grateful, I learned an important lesson. Nature is powerful and unpredictable, and you should never be underestimated. Be me in 2013 at a house party I went to with a friend I had grown up with. I knew plenty of people at the original house party, so it was all cool. Getting our drink on, talking to friends, just chilling, shooting pool and laughing, having a good time. The rest of this was told to me secondhand until the end of where the actual situation happened. You know that moment when you've crossed the threshold of drunk and blackout, where you bounce between a blackout and coming back to? I know it seems obvious, but just so we were all on the same page. We'll be at approximately 11 p.m. I had a blackout moment and came back to at another party. I was talking with some guy chilling in a lawn chair by a fire when I realized we weren't at the same party. I tensed and started looking around for my friend, saw some familiar faces from the original party, and relaxed. I walked up to one of them and asked how we got here, and they filled me in. Started chilling again and went through another blackout phase. I came back to another party where I knew no one, and it was just a kickback with my buddy and his friends. I asked him when we left the party, and he said we'd been in that location for like 2 hours. It was now 3 a.m. Another blackout phase happens. Came back to the back of a 1970s Lincoln with my buddy and me in the back, and to what appeared to be one of the LA Crips gangs. Noticed the tats and recognized one of the guys. A guy I worked with at the time, an OG Crip from the early 80s who had been very out of that life for a while and told his war stories and showed his tats and wounds. One of the guys had a super similar tat. We were in southeast LA in a particularly rough neighborhood. We pull up to a house and we get out. Check my phone and see it's 5:30 a.m. and I need to get home. My buddy looks scared as shit and mouthing that we need to get out of here. We're basically forced into this backyard where a bunch of people all stop what they're doing. Everyone's looking at me, this short white kid and my Latino friend. One dude steps up to the driver and basically yells at him for bringing randoms with him and that he needed to check his shit next time he rolled through. I'm not fully sober and full on deer in the headlights, scared that these dudes are going to rob and kill us. Those two keep going back and forth for a while, and the next thing I know, the dude is talking to the driver now holding a firearm. One dude from the group walks up to my friend at me and yells, "Where the you from?" I'm so scared I can't talk. I'm about ready to cry, and my buddy, with a shaky voice, replies, "Orange County." We don't know how we ended up here, and we very much don't want to be here either. The passenger seat guy steps up and tells this guy, "Yo, chill, I went to school with these guys. They're not in the game," especially this guy, pointing to me. He responds, "N-word, I don't give up. Why you bring the asses here? Are you in your head or something?" There are more guns in hands, and I can see shit starting to go down, and we need to leave or we're not going to be alive. Passenger seat dude basically distracts the crowd, which was our cue to leave quickly. We book it down the street at like 6 a.m., and some dude on his stoop on the corner of the block comes down and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, guys, where's the fire?" We tell him that we needed to get back to Orange County and that we didn't know how we ended up in South LA. We had come from a few parties in West Orange County. This dude with the calmest demeanor and voice says, "You ended up at the party down the way? Dog, I got you. That house is a drug house, and you're lucky you got out before the shooting started." Not 10 seconds later, gunfire erupts, and this dude tells us to hop in the whip, and we peel out of there. This dude drove us all the way to our neighborhood and told me not to tell him exactly where our houses were and that we needed to wait until he was all the way out of sight. Dude saved us from wandering around lost as shit and trying to figure out how to get back home from there. Trevon, if you're reading this, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for reading the situation and using your gas to get us back home. Words can't describe how thankful I am. I'm no longer friends with the friend I was with. Yeah, that's a pretty wild story and a dangerous one. I mean, not just the fact that you ended up at a gang drug house, but that you got to the point where you blacked out. I know youthful, reckless abandon is going to happen, but I hope that was a learning moment for you. Hope you're well. When I was a pilot in Afghanistan Air Force and my landing gear weren't indicating they were locked down, I had to go troubleshoot the issue over this sketchy town at low fuel because it was the end of the mission. Then they still weren't indicating down, so they came in to land and it was fine. The switch that makes the light turn on was broken, but they were down. But I didn't know they were actually down, so I was like, damn, that was crazy. I live in Lebanon, which is getting bombed by Israelis on a daily basis. And yesterday, I almost got hit by a missile that landed just a few meters away from the targeted building, which became rubble and dust in a matter of 1 second, and ended up brutally killing all those inside that building and injuring some around the area. Hopefully I just got a bit of dust in my eyes and nothing major. Being woken up in my bed by someone with a gun claiming I owed him money for drugs. I was sleeping off a hangover from a wild party when I was shaken awake by a large older guy telling me I owed him money. I argued at first, but then he pulled a gun. I got pretty compliant and started looking for my wallet. While I was looking, he grabbed my backpack and put my laptop, some sports jerseys, and all my socks inside. I gave him the money and he left. The kicker is, when we moved out months later, I found a big bag of pills under my dresser, so I really did owe him the money. I had finally built up the courage to cut off my dad. He was abusive and the reason for many attempts. I went to my grandma's, his mom's house one day, and she went grocery shopping. I was in my room and I heard a noise, and instantly I thought she had betrayed me and let him in to steal me away. I had a panic attack and locked the door. When she came back and noticed my door was locked, somehow she knew what I had just been through. She told me, "You know you don't have to be scared here. You're safe with me." And I'd never questioned her intentions since. In 2015, I was not living my best life. I was homeless and living in a not-so-nice hotel. Every other night, something crazy happened. So one night I was in my room and heard a knock on the door, which was weird because no one knew I was there. So I went over and looked out the peephole, and it was a police badge. So I cracked the door while leaving the chain on there and asked what was up. The guy kicked the door open, knocking me down and telling me that they got a call and I was doing unscrupulous things in the room and saying my full name. The guy jerked me up, backhanded me, and tossed me on the bed. He told me if I gave him all of my money, it went over, and I looked out of the peephole, and it was a police badge. I only had $120 left from my paycheck for next week's rent. I refused to give it to him, so he hit me again. He started searching my room, so I ran out of the room and went to the desk where the night clerk was there, and a huge grin on his face, asking, "Did they find you?" So I called 911, asking why the officers think it's okay to attack a woman alone in her room at night. They sent cops out, and it turned out to be the night clerk who was setting women who stayed alone at the hotel up to be robbed by giving his friend, who had a fake police uniform and badge, their information. That is one of the scariest situations I've been in. The same year, about 4 months later, After a friend and I moved in together, I was almost kidnapped. It was 3 a.m. on a Thursday. I had just gotten off work from my shift at Denny's. I was walking home after stopping at Speedway to grab coffee because my next job started at 5 a.m. I was listening to headphones, not paying particular attention to anything, when an early 2000s Toyota Corolla pulled up next to me, rolled the window down, and asked me for directions to an address. I couldn't understand the guy because he had a thick Polish accent, so he turned the overhead light on and put a piece of paper under it. Not thinking or feeling any danger, I poked my head in the window to get a better look, and that's when the man grabbed my arm and tried to pull me inside the car. Thankfully, my coffee was fresh and hot. I flung it on him, he let go, and I ran. I called the cops, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to do anything. My ex-husband was driving us home from work late one night. We had some minor disagreement or something, I can't remember. Nothing important, but we weren't on the same page. He started speeding up the car, going toward a very sharp turn. There was a huge yellow sign with an arrow straight ahead of us, warning about the turn. We took this route every night. He knew about the turn. He was going well over the speed limit and didn't slow down until I screamed at him. I started crying and he got mad at me because it wasn't that serious. This was scarier to me than the time he literally said, "I'm going to kill you," with a knife pointed at me, and then decided that bashing my head in with a marble urn was a better idea. So he lifted it up over my head. I don't know why he didn't do it, but obviously I'm glad he didn't. But by this point, I was pretty numb to it, and I didn't even cry or anything. I just stared at him. Then he asked me to hold his hand until he fell asleep, so I did. Then I got my dog and left, and never went back. I'll keep it quick, but I had two very effing scary incidents in the same night. Long story short, me and an ex of mine visited India back in the early 2000s. The first instance was that we got invited back to the house of this guy we befriended. He was a shop owner and seemed really nice. He told us we could meet his family, which in India isn't uncommon. Well, TLDR. As soon as we got back to his apartment, the family turned out to be a male cousin and a male brother, rather than what we thought would be his wife or whatever. And he turned into an effing weirdo real quick. He spiked our joints with what I assume was opium-laced hashish and got us both really stoned. Yeah, I know, stupid. The two male family members glared at us in silence, a look of, I don't know, hate in their eyes. Meanwhile, our shopkeeper friends were messing with our heads, making moves on my girl, trying to isolate us both in different rooms and making veiled threats whilst we were locked inside his apartment. Kept telling me stories of people he'd frightened and that he wasn't a fan of Westerners, etc. He told me to come into the kitchen and pulled out what I initially thought was a gun and pointed it in my face. Thankfully, it wasn't a gun, just one of those long oven lighter thingies, but I was initially too stoned to notice the difference. After a little back and forth, we managed to convince him to let us go. I can't even really remember how we convinced him, but he begrudgingly let us go when he realized I wasn't going to let him abuse my girlfriend. It was now about 2 a.m. in a strange town with hardly any lights, and we were lost in back alleys. He also gave us fake directions home just to mess with us one last time. We got lost, winding alleyway after winding alleyway in the dark, but we were safe. Part 2. Okay, we're lost. We're high on AF and drowsy. We're full of adrenaline and just wanted to get back to our guest house, cold and shaking with fear and relief. Then we noticed the dogs. A big effing pack of dogs were following us down the alleyway, snarling and creeping closer. Now in India, dogs are horribly mistreated and are basically very dangerous at night and get confident in packs. Plus, some of them can be rabid. Now imagine 10 to 15 rabid, hungry dogs smelling our fear. They were trailing us for about 15 minutes, getting closer and braver, and sometimes trying to nip at our heels, getting more and more confident. Then we spot a streetlight, then the main road. Every instinct was telling me to run, but nah. The dogs followed us and started effing circling us. I told my then girlfriend to carefully pick up a stone or stick or anything to defend ourselves with. Only we couldn't find anything. Not that we would have been able to do much had they chosen to attack. There were about 10 to 15 dogs around us. I genuinely thought for that second of time that night that we were going to die, but instead of being drugged and murdered, we were going to be eaten alive. Then, flash, crack. Someone had noticed us and flicked out the front lights of the hotel and threw an effing big and heavy wooden stool at the dogs, which caused them to scatter. A hotel owner had been outside smoking and seen us pale white folk about to be eaten and basically saved our lives. I hugged that man, and so did my girlfriend, and we tipped him gratefully, and he allowed us inside to get water and to calm down for a few minutes before he escorted us back to our guest house. That guy genuinely saved our lives.